Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Conspiracy This Week. We've got a very special guest again on the show. It's Mr. Chris Spivey for part 2 of our interview of a couple of weeks ago. Now, we didn't get to all of the issues that Chris wanted to speak about, so he's been nice enough to come back on the show, and we'll be getting into some very heavy details. For those who don't know about Chris, he's a tattoo artist, but more than that, he's a journalist and a whistleblower. And I invite you to go to his website, www.chrisspivey.co.uk. I'm pretty sure that's right. So without further ado, Chris Spivey, are you there?
I am indeed, Dave. How are you?
I'm very good. So we had a great interview a couple of weeks ago, and I had a lot of feedback from people, and people were introduced to you for the first time, listeners of my show here. And I think by the same token, I was introduced to your listeners, so it's been a great match on that end. You got quite a few new articles out on your website, and one actually that caught my eye was I wanted to start with this just in case we didn't have time later on, was the one with the woman with the large breasts and the the bombs in the boobs. I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, I mean, we've had this for the past couple of weeks, this terrorist alert thing, haven't we? This old bollocks, and it is old bollocks, Dave. I don't know if you read the article that I put on before that, but we have a 20 million to 1 chance of being killed by a terrorist bomb.
Right.
Do you know? Yeah, we're spending billions and billions on this so-called unending war on terror. Something like we're spending in the UK 4 billion just protecting the shores from terrorists, and it's a 20 million to 1 chance, And so what's that all about? And as I say, I've been writing about that this past week or so, trying to educate people on that. And then I came across this article today in the Daily Mail about a credible, this is their words, not mine, a credible threat of suicide bombers, female suicide bombers, having their breasts packed with explosives, and you just think, are you for real?
that kind of gives
unbelievable. But people will fall for this.
That kind of gives a new meaning to the word dynamite boobs, doesn't it? I mean,
it does, yeah, cracking rack. It's just so stupid. Why would they do that anyway? What kind of? I mean, all right, if you're a genuine terrorist, I suppose you've got to be a bit mad. But having a tit job filled with explosives, it's sort of a bit far-fetched, but it's in a national newspaper.
That's
and if it's in a national newspaper, Dave, people believe it, don't they?
Exactly.
It's just, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, to be honest, mate, but the tears were streaming down my face when I read it. I've never read something so ridiculous in all my fucking life, mate, I'm telling you. But there you go. I give a bit of advice on the comment I made on it. If you get lucky and the woman's got a wire hanging out of her nipple, move. Don't bother.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. I've never seen anything like that. I mean, that's just
20 million to 1 chance of being killed by a terrorist, Dave. And billions and billions of pounds. You got I put some comparisons of statistics on the article I did on it.
Right.
And I can't remember exactly what they were, but it's something like you got 500 times more chance of being killed by a fireman, than you have a terrorist bomb. So many thousands, something like 16,000 times more likely to be killed in a car. Are we spending billions on car safety and all this? It's just fucking stupid, mate. Right. But people buy into it, and it gives the psychopathic governments the excuse to bump up the security budget, and we know what that's all about. It's not about terrorists. It's about people like me. It's spying on people like me and you, Dave. You know that, and nothing to do with men in bomber jackets.
Well, for myself, on my radio stream, I've seen some pretty weird IP addresses, and having dug into it a little bit, have a little bit of computer skills, not not a lot, but enough to find out. And it's funny that the provincial police here was listening in. Also in the U.S., either one of the FBI or CIA agencies were listening in, and I'm sure that they're listening in on your and going to your website.
Without a doubt. I mean, I know that I was being sort of. I'd come to their attention when I was at the Sovereign Independent anyway, because of a takeover bid, which was a strange takeover bid, which I won't really go into because the details aren't public. But I knew from certainly back 2 years ago that I was under surveillance anyway. So fuck them, mate.
Right.
Fuck them. It's all on the website anyway, so they don't need to spy on me. It's all there anyway.
You're not hiding anything. You're only telling.
No, I'm not hiding anything, mate. No, I tell them how it is.
It's funny because when you think about it, really, I mean, who's actually done most of the terror and assassination plots and all that? It's basically been the government. I mean,
Well, of course it is. The government are the terrorists. We know that. I mean, going back to the Woolwich incident,
right?
I have indisputable proof, and they're on video, that security services were involved. They couldn't have been anybody else but the security services, by their actions and what they did. Now, if Lee Rigby, the fellow who was supposedly killed, the soldier who was supposedly killed, if he was really killed, I have photographs of either a plainclothes policeman or a member of the security services standing in the blood trail. So if he was really killed, you've got a policeman there destroying evidence of the crime scene, mate, which carries a 7-year prison sentence.
Exactly. I mean, when you really look at it, I mean, it's lucky that we have people like yourself and all the alternative news media sites out there, because otherwise we'd be in the dark to all of this stuff, wouldn't we? I mean, it's
well, of course. I mean, how anybody can justify? You know what? I wouldn't know how much a mainstream media newspaper was these days, but I don't know, 50 pence or whatever it is.
Right.
But you might as well give that to 50 pence to a homeless charity, daily, rather than buy a newspaper, because it's just total bollocks, mate. I shake my head, and after time, it's got to the stage now I can't even be bothered to address the issues, because they're so blatantly obvious. That I feel like I'm insulting people's intelligence sometimes. Sort of pointing out these things. I say tits that blow up. It's like a party trick, isn't it?
That's incredible. So last time we had an interview, we spoke a little bit after the show, and you had some things that you wanted to bring up, and one of them was the Madeleine McCann kidnapping. So why don't you go into detail first? Go back and give people a little bit of an idea what this is all about, and what's your information on it, and what's your take on it?
Okay, well, now when I appeared on Vinnie Eastwood's show a few months ago, I got talking about Madeleine McCann, and it turns out that Vinnie didn't know who Madeleine McCann was. So to save any confusion, I don't know how much you know about Madeleine McCann in Canada.
Well, it's the little girl who was kidnapped, right?
She was in 2007 from a holiday resort.
Right. The parents were the prime suspects and all that, and there was all kinds of it was all over the news here. Yes. You
do. So you know about it in Canada, yeah?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yes. Okay. So we know that Madeleine and her twin sister and brother were left in their apartment alone while Kate and Jerry McCann, the parents, went for a meal with. There was a big party, mostly doctors. I think there was only one of the party who wasn't a doctor, and they was having sort of this tapas meal in a restaurant just across the way, same resort, and they was checking regularly on the kids, every 15-20 minutes. And Holly disappeared. Madeleine disappeared. Now, the official story is that she was abducted for whatever reason, you know, but it all got a little bit nasty. Anyway, one of the main suspects straight away was a fellow called Robert Murat, who lives about 120 yards away from or his mother's villa is 120 yards away from the McCann's holiday apartment. And Robert Murat was pulled in very early as a prime suspect. Subsequently, he was cleared, and he sued quite 2 or 3 British newspapers, got quite a bit in compensation. Now, then the McCanns became the official suspects.
Right.
And when Madeleine disappeared, they said that they wouldn't leave Portugal until she was found. Well, 2 days after they'd been made official suspects, they came back to England.
Okay.
And since then, we've had all these kind of wild goose chases, you know, them flying off to here, there, and everywhere, really, on possible sightings, you know, which are a load of old crap. But in 2012, a South African businessman called Stephen Birch, he entered Robert Murat's property under cover of darkness, without permission, if you like, with the most advanced ground penetrating radar available, you know, state of the art sort of thing. And he found something buried a couple of foot under this new driveway that the Murats had put down. Now, it's not a concrete driveway. It's just, I don't know, it's got I think it's got a bit of a Lee-mix sub-base and maybe a little bit tarmac, but certainly it's nothing substantial, you know.
Okay.
And this ground radar of his picked up something buried there. So he's verified by 6 independent witnesses who all agreed that there's something buried there, you know. Now, if you've read my article on my website called Digging for Madeleine, you know all the details, what led Stephen to sort of search the Murat property. Stephen is very specific when he says Robert Murat isn't involved in this, okay? Although the likelihood is that Madeleine is buried under this driveway in the Murat property, he's not implicating Robert Murat.
Right.
The reason that she's buried there is because it was really the only available place. And he's done plenty of tests, you know, exercises like bury the body, how quick it would take to dig a hole, fill it in, you know, put body in, how big it would need to be, all based on Madeleine's measurements and whatnot.
Okay.
And he said it was done in 2 shifts. The hole was dug, and then sort of half an hour later, Madeleine was moved and buried. Now, the police, the British police, know about Stephen's findings, and they told the McCanns the day before Stephen's findings were going to be released, which day was released, and they appeared in newspapers around the world, you know.
Right.
And they didn't want to know, for whatever reason, they didn't want to know. Now, there's a video on YouTube of Kate McCann being interviewed on a program we have here called This Morning, one of these magazine programs, you know, it goes out live every day.
Right.
And Philip Schofield, the presenter, was talking to Kate McCann, and he said something along the lines of, now, Stephen Birch, and as soon as he mentioned her name, there was a very, very visible facial tic come across Kate's face. She immediately became very defensive, very surly, and when Philip Schofield continued talking about Stephen and his findings, she said, at the end of the day, who is he? Now, I don't know about you, Dave, but if my little girl had gone missing, and 120 yards from where she'd gone missing, someone had found what 6 independent experts agree is some kind of body buried, then I would want that place dug up.
Right.
But,
well, definitely, yes. I would. I'd be in there with
and the McCanns had a mantra: "They will leave no stone unturned."
Right.
Well, they're leaving a great big fucking stone unturned when you got a body buried just 120 yards from where she went, from where she disappeared. Now, instead of seizing upon Stephen's evidence, what Kate McCann did the very next day is bugger off to India on the premise of there'd been a sighting of someone who could be Madeleine. Okay. Now, there's 7 billion people in the world, Dave, and the chances of, what we're talking about 5 years later, 6 years later now, the chances of someone picking out Madeleine right are slim to none. And the chances are, as you know, she's probably dead. Let's not beat around the bush. But they won't, and the British police won't look at Stephen's evidence, and the Portuguese authorities won't look at Stephen's evidence. I've been speaking to Stephen tonight just before I started speaking to you.
Right.
Because he wants me to push his petition for, which is also called Digging for Madeleine, and it's on the Avaz website, and he's asked that people sign it, which is a petition to put pressure on the authorities to investigate this.
What is the website? What is the website for that?
Avaz, all I've got, I think that's just a petition site, avaz.org, okay. And the petition is called Digging for Madeleine McCann.
Okay, so they can probably find it from...
They'll find it there straight away. Yeah. But I say, so we've got no one looking at this evidence. In the meantime, we've got our Home Secretary, Theresa May, starting this British investigation into Madeleine's disappearance. Now, in late 2012, the Daily Star, a British national newspaper, tried to get Theresa May to release 3 top secret files on Madeleine's disappearance. And Theresa May actually took it to court to stop these top secret files from being revealed,
Right.
In the meantime, she started this, what was called Operation Grange, which is a British investigation into Madeleine's disappearance. Now, how the fuck can you have an investigation when the person who's calling the investigation is holding back 3 top secret files? 3, not 1, not 2, 3 top secret files on the investigation, all containing sensitive information about Madeleine's disappearance. It doesn't make sense.
No,
Yet the British taxpayers forking out millions of fucking pounds here, on a wild goose chase. Now, in all the national papers over here, we've had police have come up with 30 new suspects. They think, that's fucking good. Like, the Portuguese must have been right fucking incompetent if the police can 6 years later come up with 30 odd new suspects, But that's bollocks again, in mainstream media talk, because the police haven't even been over there yet to start investigating, because they can't start investigating without the Portuguese authority. Now, I think that authority has just been granted. So these 30 new suspects that we're meant to be impressed over are just what they've gleaned from reading the Portuguese police reports on the case. Okay. So, you sort of think, well, these aren't new suspects then, because if they're in the official Portuguese reports, then they must have been there for a reason, you know. I say there's been no new investigation because the Portuguese authorities, they've also closed down the investigation over there. So it's just bollocks. But you know, the police are saying 6 of these suspects are white van men. You know, people who were seen in a white van, and you think, why? You've got a body that's been agreed by 6 independent witnesses, 120 yards from the fucking scene. Now, I was a builder a long time ago, Dave.
Right.
And I used to do a lot of digging. I could dig that myself and down to foot in a couple of hours, have a look at it and put it back, because it's only a single top drive, put it back and you'd never know I'd been there.
Right.
You know? Yet they're wasting millions and millions of pounds on wild fucking goose chases, while our Home Secretary is holding back 3 top secret files. Now, how can that be a fucking investigation, mate? You know? So you've got to ask, well, why aren't they investigating it? Why do the McCanns not want it investigated? Why do the British police not want it investigated? Why do the Portuguese not want it investigated? Well, the official line is that they already used ground penetrating radar on Robert Muirbat's back garden when he was the main suspect.
Okay. If
you look at my article, Digging for Madeleine, it has photographs on it, because they did indeed look for use ground penetrating radar on the site. Now, there's one theory that they actually found Madeleine's body, and this might sound a little bit far-fetched, but believe me, it's not. Because what happened was sort of 21 days after Madeleine had gone missing, the McCanns hired a Renault Scenic, and I think in conjunction with the Portuguese authorities, we flew 2 sniffer dogs trained in sniffing out bodies, you know. Now, these dogs are always 100% spot on, never been wrong before, and they found traces or they indicated that there'd been some sort of body in the back of this Renault Scenic, which, given the publicity that the case got, you know, there was the world's press parked outside the Playa de Luis holiday complex, and it would have been impossible for the McCanns to sort of, if they had Madeleine's body, it would have been impossible for them to move it in a Renault Scenic, given the press attention that was on them at the time. So the theory is that Madeleine was found and DNA was planted in the Renault Scenic because the Portuguese authorities knew that Robert Muirbat was innocent. Now, why would the police authorities know that Robert Muirbat was innocent? He was a police. He speaks. He's English, but he speaks perfect Portuguese, and he does police. He's a police translator, so he's very well known to the police. You know, and there's a certain photograph in the same article of Robert Muirbat and the police all chatting amongst themselves. You know,
right?
So Stephen is of the opinion that Madeleine was found and the DNA evidence was planted because the copper, and I'm not going to try and pronounce his name, everyone has foreign names, Dave, the copper in charge of the investigation knew that Muirbat was innocent and suspects that the McCanns are, shall we say, not as innocent as what they would have you believe. But anyway, also where Stephen says Madeleine's body is, there was a large, there was building debris sort of piled up there. Now, for a ground penetrating radar to work, it has to be flat to the ground. You understand?
Right.
If you tilt it, it's not going to read properly.
Okay.
And this building debris that kept piling up and get bigger and bigger, where Stephen says that Madeleine is buried, made it impossible for the ground radar to take a reading there, you know. And I say that we have in the article there's photographs of the original site, how it was when the police did their radar investigation, and then the driver subsequently built over it, which Stephen believes is because the Murats have dogs, and when Madeleine was buried, it was just earth, you know, and the dogs was trying to dig her up.
Okay.
And hence, this is why he put, you know, this cheap as a cheap drive. It's you know, simply might say it's not anything substantial. But why did he put the drive there? There's no need to, because at the front of this villa is a double driveway and double garage, you know, and there's really, most of the time, there's only the mother, Robert Murat's mother, who lives there anyway, and Stevens, as far as he can see, the back driveway is never used anyway. And it doesn't go anywhere, David. There's no room for turning a car around. You know, if you drove into it, you'd have to reverse out onto the road. You know, whereas their front drives, you know, you can spin around, turn around, and do whatever, drive in and out, sort of thing. Well, so it's a driveway that goes to nowhere. And I say that we have photographs all superimposed over each other, so people can see. You know, that where they believe Madeleine is buried probably wasn't ground radared.
Now, has Stephen done like any other investigating other than that? Like, has he questioned people to see if you know, what kind of activity was happening in and around that time? And what about the kids, the other kids that were in the apartment?
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean. We're supposed to believe that, and if you read the Tapas 9, they call them. This is the McCanns and their friends. You know, I say all doctors, barring one couple who wasn't, and I think one of them's mothers, but it was 9 of them, and you got to be careful, yeah, because the McCanns are very quick to sue. They say, according to their witness statements...
Say allegedly as much as you can.
Allegedly. This is all allegedly, and this is just what I've been told. The McCann sort of... there wasn't any length of time longer than 10 minutes where the kids weren't being checked on, because it wasn't just the McCann's children. It was... They all had children, do you know?
Right.
So, apart from... I believe Dr. David Payne, who was, he had a baby, you know, one of them intercom things with him.
Baby monitor?
Yeah, that's it. But so, you know, people were designated to go and check, and according to the evidence, I don't think you'll find a period where there's longer than 10 minutes. This is according to the McCanns and the Tapas 9's evidence. But there's a lot of discrepancies in that. A lot of you know, sort of what time the McCanns actually turned up, and you know, you sort of have the McCann. If you believe the McCann's evidence, they sort of turned up for this dinner date, and 5 minutes later they went back to check. Well, why 5 minutes later after arriving? Do you know? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of discrepancies in that as well. And another one of the Tapas 9 said, well, Jerry went to check on the children. She also, I don't know, if she went to the toilet or whatever she did, and she said she saw someone carrying a child away, a man.
Okay.
Now, the way she described him, she sort of described him as a bit of a Bob Marley type, you know, with rasted dreadlock hair sort of thing, although white, but with dreadlock hair, and 2 days, I think it was 2 days later, she changed this description to match Robert Murat perfectly. And this is when interest started being focused on Robert Murat, you know. So, I say he'd been cleared anyway, and he wanted a lot of money, and there are allegations made by certain people that the evidence was changed to suit the story and Murat's description, you know. Whether that's right or not, I can't say.
Right.
But so certainly the evidence keeps changing, and what is very clear is this holiday was more about the parents than the children, because every day the McCann children had been left at the nursery. You know, they have a nursery creche, whatever they call them, on site. And then they sort of were put in this nursery early in the morning till, you know, last thing at night when they'd be taken by the McCanns and given their dinner and then put to bed. You know, and then the McCanns would go out to have their meals or whatever. So it certainly wasn't about the children anyway.
But
it's a bit hard to say what I've been told without sort of incurring legal action, if you know what I mean. I say the McCanns are very, very quick to sue, but...
Right. Now, I don't know. I mean, it all sounds fishy to me, obviously.
It's very, very, very fishy. Now, Jerry McCann is a Freemason.
Okay.
There's we all know about Freemasons, Dave, don't we?
Right, of course. Yeah.
And it would appear that he is being protected by the British authorities. I mean, we've even had Prince Charles taking an interest in this, which is like, why the fuck would Prince Charles take an interest, you know? Children go missing every fucking day of the week, like, you know?
Exactly.
And one theory that I can put forward to that is that Jerry McCann, who was a doctor, West Germany commissioned a report about people living near nuclear power stations, look into their health, you know. And the West German report came back that people living around nuclear power stations had significantly more chance of getting cancer.
Right.
Okay. At the same time, the British authorities commissioned a report, and Jerry McCann was in charge of this report. Now, where the West German report come back saying that people living near nuclear power stations were much more likely to get cancer, the British report by Jerry McCann came back saying, no, it's fucking no chance. Same as anybody else. There's no danger living near nuclear power stations. Now, maybe they have different nuclear power in West Germany,
yeah,
Dave. I don't know. Do you know, but one says, the West Germans say, yes, you can. The English, by Jerry McCann, says, no, you can't. Work it out for yourself, mate. That's all I'm saying on the matter.
Well, there's all kinds of studies that prove that, you know, I mean, any of these situations, you know, the 3 Mile Island, Fukushima and all that, I mean,
They want to get Jerry McCann over there, mate. There'd be no danger.
Yeah, they'll just write it off.
He'll sort Japan's problems out, no fucking problem whatsoever. Get Jerry McCann over there, say no, perfectly safe.
That's incredible.
Despite the fucking thousands and thousands and thousands of tons of water pouring into the sea every day that's not contaminated with nuclear waste.
Well, it's incredible when you think about it. I mean, I don't know what kind of a doctor would actually say something like that, knowing all the studies that are out there.
That's the kind of would. Let's not beat around the bush here.
Yeah.
A high-ranking, a high-degree Freemason would say that, wouldn't he? If it was asked, don't they have to do what they've asked? If they've asked a favour, don't they have to agree to it?
Yeah. Something like that, and they can't rat out on their brothers, you know, in the.
Everybody knows, and it's the same all over the world. Whenever you investigate a murder, straight away you look at the family and close friends.
Right. That
is official, because I think the statistic is something like 80% of murders are committed by someone that the victim knows.
Right.
The English police, despite starting this Operation Granger investigation into Madeleine's disappearance and being hampered by our Home Secretary who commissioned the investigation, the British police refused to interview the McCanns even though they was official suspects. And if the case was reopened in Portugal, there'd still be official suspects. Yet the British police refused to even interview them, or officially interview them, shall we say. Why? That goes against all official procedure.
Right.
You know, but so once again, it's you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours.
Right. Well, it doesn't make any sense, even just to
none of it makes sense.
To discredit and or to to get Mr. Birch's story, whether he's I mean, I believe that he's probably telling the truth with what he's saying. And
it's all and there's Stephen's which he wrote and emailed me specifically to go into the article. His account and what he'd done, i.e. digging holes in similar ground. He had soil samples sent over to Africa, so they could sort of find a spot with similar ground. And then they had a doll made up the same size as Madeleine and whatnot, to sort of see how long it would take to dig a hole, put a body in, backfill it, sort of thing,
Right.
So he's done all this. Now, Stephen's been told that if he returns to Portugal, unofficially told, if he returns to Portugal, he'll be fitted up. He will not be allowed to make a nuisance of himself, if you like.
Right.
So he can't go back to Portugal. In the meantime, you have this evidence now coming up to a year old, saying there's been a body buried in there. There's nothing to stop anybody from going and moving that body,
Right.
So it needs to be done sooner rather than later. Now, like I say, I could do the job myself on my own for a couple of hours and have it back, and you'd never know I'd been there. They don't even have to do that, though, Dave. I mean, they can simply probe it, can't they?
Right.
Bang a couple of spikes into the ground, then stick their probes, whatever they do, into the ground, and they even got to dig it up. If the probes come back, well, yes, there is a body under there, then they can do that, And all this is cheap, yet we're spending millions, fucking flying policemen over there, and going on wild goose chases on suspects, 30 suspects that was, identified sort of 6 years ago. It doesn't make sense, mate. It doesn't make sense at all for a very, very simple job. I say Stephen's findings, they're reported all over the world in newspapers. We had the This Morning programme live where Kate McCann physically had a facial twitch as soon as Stephen's name was mentioned.
Right.
Why? I say, if that was my daughter, Dave, there's no one to stop me. I'd be fucking in there with a shovel now, mate. Do you know what I mean? Wanting to know. Not. Oh no, we've got to India and see because someone spotted a little girl with blonde hair. Do you know? Absolutely fucking ridiculous, mate. The whole thing stinks. But
well, it's obvious as a parent myself. If even just to rule something out. I mean, I would agree to just about anything. Just to rule it out. Just to say, you know what? I mean, like, is it? Maybe it's right. Maybe it isn't. But let's just find out. You've
got, I say, it's verified by 6 independent experts. The actual charts and even pictures of Stephen doing this ground radar check, penetrating radar check. All the pictures are on the site. You got, why are McCann so against it? Why are the British police so against it? Why are the Portuguese police so against it? The reason they're also against it, mate, is that it's in none of their best interests for Madeleine to be found.
Right.
And that is the answer. Madeleine doesn't want to be found at the moment. There's a nice little cash cow going there. Everyone's cleared. If Madeleine is found there, that's going to lead to an awful lot of awkward questions, and then in turn it's going to lead to how the fuck did Madeleine get there anyway?
Exactly. We're coming up on the first break, Chris, and after the break I want to continue with this story and give you the opportunity to get Stephen's message across, and also pick up on some other news that you might have that you really want to get into. So
talk about the NSPCC as well.
Okay.
If we can, Dave.
Sure, no problem. We'll be back in just a minute.
Okay, mate.
We are back on Conspiracy to Sleep with our very special guest, Mr. Chris Spivey. Now, Chris, you were talking about the Madeleine McCann abduction and Stephen Birch's information on it. So, if you please, can you continue and enlighten us on this fascinating story?
Well, there's not that much more to add, really, on this now, Dave. I say the full story for me to explain the ins and outs of how it was done and whatnot would take more than the 90 minutes that we've got.
Right. I wanted to ask one question, though. I wanted to ask one question. Have the people who own this property refused to have...
They had Robert Murat, well, it's actually Robert Murat's mother. They also have refused, yeah.
Okay.
Now, obviously, like I just said to you, if she is found there, it's going to open up a whole can of worms. And not least Robert Murat is going to be implicated, right, as well as the McCanns are going to be implicated. Right. You know, now the body would be 7 years old, well, 6 years old. So it's going to be a little bit hard to ascertain how she died anyway.
Right.
You know, and it could all get very, very messy. So yeah, Robert Murat has also refused to allow permission. But obviously, as you know, if the authorities want to do it, he won't have a choice in the matter.
Exactly.
So the fact that he's saying no doesn't really come into it.
Now there was another story that you were talking about that you wanted to get into. So if you can, maybe you can start the second half of the show with that. Yeah.
Now, I don't know whether you have the NSPCC over there. That's the National Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Children.
No, well, we do have some agencies for child protection.
Because you have our Queen, and the Queen is actually the patron.
Right. But it's not really called that. It's not called. It isn't called that. It's Child Protective Services that we have, and there's all kinds of organizations and stuff.
Well,
but
what the NSPCC is a children's charity. Now they call it a charity, but it gets government funding.
Right.
And it is the biggest children's charity in this country. Okay. So the Queen is the patron. Prince Andrew is the face of it, as is someone called Peter Mandelson.
Okay.
Now, Peter Mandelson has twice been drummed out of British politics for wrongdoing. Okay. Yeah. He is allegedly a paedophile, as is Prince Andrew, or Princess Andrew,
right? As
is the Queen. Anyway, I was contacted probably last summer 2012, by a social worker who used to work for the NSPCC.
Okay.
Through Marshall, I can tell her, you know, because Sue has, at first she was anonymous, as you'll see for why when I get into the story, but no, she's now happy to speak publicly about it, if anybody would give us the chance to speak publicly about it. Now, Sue is a qualified social worker, okay, and she was working for the NSP at her Acorn Centre in Blackpool. Now, the Acorn Centre dealt primarily with traumatised children, do you know?
Okay.
Okay, grief counselling, if you like. Anyway, shortly after Sue started there, they had brought a manager in from their Blackburn branch, a South African called Heinrich Brokaw.
Okay.
Okay, and now Sue and the two others who work there, who don't want to be named, At first, everything was great. Groskopf seemed happy to sort of just let them get on with it. He didn't interfere in cases and whatnot.
Right.
And everything was fine until they went away on one of these, conference, a weekend conference, whatever. There's a little bit more to it, but it's not really important. But this Groskopf and Sue and this other social worker went there, and it was picked up on that Groskopf was very uncomfortable. Okay, didn't not seem be able to interact with his other managers, and seemed very unsure of himself. Didn't things that he should have known, being a qualified social worker, he didn't, shall we say?
Okay.
So when they got back, they did some digging, and it turns out that Groskopf was at one time South Africa's most wanted man for a string of terrorist attacks. Now we know at the time this would have been when Groskopf was wanted, the most wanted man would have been between 1987 and 1990. Okay, which, as you know, South Africa was in apartheid, and the ANC was banned. But the ANC was the political wing. The terrorist wing was MK. Okay?
Right.
Now, the quite not totally unique, but the strange thing is that Groskopf is white and came from a very prominent South African family. His father, Professor Groskopf, was the editor of South Africa's largest newspaper, Boyle. Okay, so it kind of obviously we all know about apartheid, white rule and whatnot, and the white upper classes treating the blacks just however they fucking wanted, really. And so really, sorry, Dave.
No, I said in the long history of the slave trade out in South Africa, and the money that's made.
Yeah. Okay, so on paper, Groskopf should have been, with apartheid, not against the regime. But what he did, he sort of buggered off and joined the ANC, and very, very quickly, within 6 months, he'd been transferred to MK, which is, like I say, the paramilitary wing of the ANC. Okay. Now, he's implicated in at least 8 murders and hundreds of casualties from 3 car bombs, although he's only admitted to 1. But I say he was the most wanted man in South Africa with a big price on his head. And what he did, he entered England on a false passport and a false identity.
Right.
Yet, miraculously, he was allowed to stay. Now, at this time, this was sort of like apartheid was coming to an end, and the UK was repatriating all the exiles, but Groskopf wasn't an exile. He was a terrorist, the most wanted man in South Africa. And the UK had an extradition treaty with South Africa. Yet he was allowed to stay, even though he entered the country on a false passport, false identity. Very quickly, he became a social worker. Now, to be a social worker, you have to be registered with the Social Care Council, right. Okay? And you have to renew your registration every 2 years. Now, 2 managers at the NSPCC fraudulently, knowingly registered Groskopf with the council, okay, and Sue found out about this, and these other 2, they found out about this, so they went to their bosses, above Groskopf, with their findings, And it turns out that they knew. They knew. Now, this is a man who's responsible for 8 murders and hundreds and hundreds of casualties. We're talking, lost limbs, whatnot. Made the Boston bomb look like a hoax. Right. And here he is, the manager of a grief counselling. Well, that's a bit like having a paedophile in charge of the school swimming team. Right. Do you know?
That's incredible.
So they went to the managers above him, only to find out that Groskopf had already been investigated and cleared while he was at Blackburn. And how this came about is because in 2008, the Truth and Reconciliation hearings were heard in South Africa, which was where not only ANC and MK terrorists were pardoned for their crimes as long as they confessed to them. The police and whatnot, who was a little bit underhand and shady, were also, pardoned for their crimes. But obviously, by then South Africa had an ANC government in. So that's like me sort of ordering someone to go out and kill in my name, then me becoming king and forgiving them, if you understand what I mean. Right. They're going to be forgiven, whatever. However, Groskopf was first meant to appear in 2008, but he didn't. Why didn't he? He didn't because it was far too dangerous for him to go home to South Africa. So you got to ask, why was it far too dangerous for him to go home? Because, with ANC, we've had Mandela and Zumba's in there now, and all ever since the apartheid ended, an ANC president, So, and they're treated like kings over there, they can do no wrong, sort of thing.
Right.
So he should have been the same, being an all-conquering hero, having done his bit for the regime. But he can't. Why? Well, there could be a multitude of answers to that, but to carry on with the story, he didn't go. He was too scared to go home in 2008. He asked if he could produce his evidence in writing, and they wouldn't agree to that, because I say this was like a court of law. You had your defence team and the prosecution, if you like, would sort of say why should you be pardoned, and you had to meet a certain criteria. You had the MK terrorists had to have acted specifically in the greater good of getting rid of apartheid, because MK were fuckers, don't they? Right. Torture, necklacing and all that, on different political parties which wouldn't have been forgiven. Anyway, they refused, so Groskopf carried on being still a wanted man in South Africa, working for the NSPCC. Then in 2011, he was offered amnesty again, providing that he attended in person. So Groskopf had no choice. Now, on his application, and I've got his job application form here, he said that he admitted to working for the ANC on his job application, but like I say, the ANC is a political party, not a terrorist party. That is MK. He made no mention of MK whatsoever, and he listed his duties as all being clerical, if you like. Didn't say fuck all about the car bomb that he planted outside the army barracks at Witwatersrand Command in Johannesburg. So he had to ask for time off, and this is when they say that they first knew. I don't believe that, to be honest, as I say, because it's certainly strange. Ken Baker would have been the Home Secretary at the time. Certainly strange how South Africa's most wanted man was allowed to enter the country under a false passport and false name. And bearing in mind, he was South Africa's most wanted man for 8 murders. Why was he allowed to stay? I believe the reason he was allowed to stay is because he was working for the British security services, as many MK terrorists were at the time. Okay. And also he spent a lot of time in Russia. We've because the ANC were obviously backed by the Russians as well, and the East Germans, being communist at the time. So he would have had a lot of information, and he was highly trained. There's no doubt that he was highly trained in sending covert messages and whatnot, you know, highly trained in the use of bombs, making bombs and whatnot. So he would have been useful to the British security services, if you understand what I mean.
Right.
I mean, it's not there was a suggestion in 1998 that he was working for the South African security services as a double agent, you know. Anyway, so and it's since been admitted by subsequent governments that we did have a lot of MI6 undercover agents or plants in the MK, you know.
Right.
So I believe that he was working for him anyway, but he was certainly fast-tracked through social work. He'd been investigated by the NSPCC and seen fit to be a grief counsellor. This first investigation said, you know, they'd gone to his boss, a woman called Dorothy, I forget her fucking last name. But anyway, she said, no, his work's fucking perfect. Like, he used the tits, the bollocks, you know? And he was allowed to stay. Yeah, so he's moved to Blackpool as manager of this grief counsellor. It then materialises that this Dorothy is his girlfriend, and they're still together now. They still live together. They run a private practice, or they're a registered social worker with Bermondsey, if I remember right, Bermondsey Council. But he's got private practice in Yorkshire with this Dorothy. So she's going to say, yeah, he's the tits, he's the bollocks, and because you know, they were shagging each other like.
Right.
Anyway, this wasn't good enough for Sue, quite rightly so as well. I say this man was wanted for. He got no qualms about blowing kids up, and there was kids hurt and mainly civilians hurt in these 3 car bombs, you know. Mm-hmm. And anyone who sort of can do that, regardless of the reason you're doing it, it isn't really fit to be manager of a grief counsellor, especially not for a charity run by the Queen.
Right.
So they went to the Daily Mirror, which is one of our biggest newspapers, and I believe it was either the Observer or the Express, I'm not sure which, both very, very interested and wanting to run the story. There'd also been a Panorama, which is a BBC investigative program, you know, and they sort of met with the production crew, you know, with a view to exposing on telly as well. Next thing, they've gone to the General and Social Care Council and reported that it was fraudulently registered. So he's been suspended. The 2 managers were under investigation, the 2 who backed his registration. They wasn't suspended, but they was under investigation, and it was taken out of Sue and her colleagues' hands. The General and Social Care were going to push ahead with getting him getting Grove-Cross struck off for fraudulently registering anyway, and along with these 2 senior managers, Gordon Ratcliffe and I forget the other's name, but it's not really important anyway. And the investigation went on, and all of a sudden, the Daily Mirror and the other newspaper and Panorama all pulled out. They said they're not going to go over the story. So why not? And she was told it was because of influence. Okay, so Sue, still not to be fobbed off, went to who was then the big chief, a fellow called Sir Richard Deere, and he is a Sir, obviously knighted by the Queen, thinking that he would be absolutely horrified to learn that he had South Africa's most wanted man in charge of his grief counselling centre in Blackpool. Richard Deere basically told her, fuck off and don't ever contact me again. Okay?
I'm confused about this because I know in Canada and I know in the U.S. and that, I don't know how it works in England and that, but don't you have to go through steps just to have the ability to work, like a green card, like an employment card?
Exactly, and I say Groskopf was allowed to stay despite being South Africa's longest man. Also, before he came to England, he caused a diplomatic incident, which was what had happened is that the South African authorities, security services, had got word that he was sheltering in the ambassador for West Germany, based in South Africa, and he was so wanted, they kicked down a fucking door, coming in, looking for Groskopf, who wasn't there. And it caused a major diplomatic incident with Boyle and everyone having to apologise to the West Germans and giving them an undertaking nothing like this would ever happen again. But obviously, embassy property, you're immune anyway. It's a no-no. But they still, in their quest to find Groskopf, they kicked the fucking door down. And he wasn't there. So this is how dangerous and how much the South African authorities wanted him anyway. He then went to Russia, did some more training in covert work and whatnot before entering in the UK. Ken Baker would have been the Home Secretary at the time, and he was allowed to stay.
Okay.
And fast-tracked through social work. You can speculate all you like, Dave, but there's been a fucking lot of bombs from between 1991 and 2013 in the UK. And we're not talking about Middle East terrorists. You're talking about the IRA and whatnot.
Right.
It's well known that the IRA had links with MK anyway. In fact, they set up, they provided the MK with a training ground in Angola. So there's very, very strong links between the IRA and MK. And a lot of bombs, and Groskopf is an expert in bombs, planting bombs, making bombs, car bombs. We've had an awful lot of fucking car bombs go off, Yeah. Why was he allowed to stay? I'm saying this was at a time when the UK was kicking exiles, which Groskopf wasn't an exile. They was kicking exiles out of the country, were allowing the most wanted man in South Africa to stay. It just doesn't add up. So what was he doing? What was he doing for the security services over there, Anyway, so the newspapers and the television had been backed off, so Sue contacted me. And I said, well, I don't care, I'll run the story, which I have done, and you can find most of the details on my website. And the article is called The NSPCC, Rotten to the Core, Part 1, Heinrich Groskopf. What happened when I broke the story, and I say, as you know, I have quite a large following.
Right.
A lot of people was asking questions, how the fuck was this happening? And they was leaving questions asking whether it was true or not on the NSPCC's Facebook page. And the NSPCC refused to answer.
Okay.
On top of that, people was writing to their MPs saying, is this fucking true? This mass murderer in charge of grief counselling severely traumatised children. And none of them, the typical response from all the MPs was that it wasn't in their constituency, you have to get in touch with the police and whatnot. Now, bearing in mind that Sue had 3 times gone to the police about this, especially after finding timer switches, which the Acorn Centre doesn't use. Whereas Groskopf at the Truth and Reconciliation Committee hearings in 2011 admitted that he used timer switches on his car bombs, and the police refused to get involved as well. In fact, everybody refuses to get involved. Well, my MP and David Cameron don't speak to me anyway. They pretend that I'm a non-person. They won't even acknowledge that they've had my communications. But we had a crusading MP over here called Tom Watson. Now, Tom Watson, after the Jimmy Savile story broke, stood up in the House of Commons at the Prime Minister's Question Time and asked David Cameron if he knew about a paedophile ring that had been operating out at number 10 Downing Street. And this sort of gave Watson a bit of prestige, you know, and a lot of publicity, and everyone thinking, oh, this is a good guy, one of the good guys. Mm-hmm. Well, I'd read up on Watson anyway, and I knew he wasn't one of the good guys. He was just a typical MP, you know, take, for very, very little effort. But a lot of people have got in touch with Watson as well about thinking that he's a good guy, you know, on the people's side, asking him to investigate my claims. Now, my claims are all back. I would not have run the story had Sue not been able to send me all the official documents. I say his job application, his all the legal proceedings. The solicitor for the NSPCC was mysteriously sacked. She said to Sue that there is no way that she would ever let him get away with this. She's going to pursue it all the way. She then mysteriously got sacked and replaced by another solicitor who didn't want to know. So I would not have run the story anyway had I not had been sent all the proof, and I was sent a pile of papers that amounted to 2 inches in thickness, you know, with all the evidence. So I run the story, and I sent it to every national newspaper in the country, especially stating, you know, that I had everything I say in here can be backed up by paperwork, official paperwork and documents. I emailed it to Daily Mirror, who was going to run the story. Now, just slightly getting off topic, last year I also had someone contact me about paedophile sites on Twitter.
Okay.
And they'd gone to the Daily Mirror. And the Daily Mirror said, yeah, we'll investigate. Then they got back in touch with this fella and said, no, we won't investigate. So I run the story again. No. And I passed it on to an anti-paedophile site, you know, a friend of mine who runs an anti-paedophile site. Okay. He reported it to the authorities, the paedophile unit, and they didn't seem interested. So he then employed a firm of hackers, if you like, and they took these sites down themselves, and it was on the front page of the Daily Mirror. Now, it's ironic that the Daily Mirror got offered the fucking story in the first place, but wouldn't do anything about it. So I was a bit critical of the Daily Mirror when I wrote to him with this Grove story, saying, like, you know, I know that you fucking pulled out. Are you going to run it now? And I sent it to every other national newspaper, and I sent it to some international newspapers like the Indian Times, Press TV, RT, and I got one response from about the 20-odd newspapers and TV, BBC I wrote to as well, ITV. I got one response from, I think it was the Irish Times, just saying that they'd look into it, but nothing ever came back. No one else got a response. A lot of people wrote to ITV and BBC about it. No one responded. The Daily Mail turned around to someone and said, Chris Spivey, oh, he's got it in for us, he has. Yeah. Which I have. I've got it in for the Daily Mail because they're fucking useless, Dave. Make no qualms about it. That's the only run the story about the bomb tits. Bless them. Bless their little curl shops.
But don't you have to, just to be like in the social work environment, don't you have to have some kind of skill set? Don't you have to have some kind of training?
4 years.
A bachelor degree and all this
4 years training, Dave. And I say they're very, very strict. And even when you qualify as a social worker, unless you're registered with the Social and General and Social Care Council, you still can't practice. And you have to re-register, even if there's no change in your circumstances. Right. You still have to re-register every 2 years in this country. Very, very strict.
So this guy gets a position.
Groskopf seems to have been doing 3 fucking part-time jobs. Well, attending fucking universities and colleges and whatnot, and still managed to get it within 3 years.
Incredible.
And end up as a fucking manager, you know. despite it being quite obvious that he didn't know what the fuck he was talking about. So I say, we had Richard Deere, Sir Richard Deere, who, after, I don't know, do you know Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman, the two little girls who were murdered by, allegedly by Ian Huntley?
No, I'm not familiar with that. No.
I don't know if you know, but it was a big case over here. But Sir Richard Deere, was in charge of compiling a report about safety at work and who you employ and whatnot, because Ian Huntley was a caretaker at the school these two girls attended, you know?
Okay.
Yeah, there he was. He's been told that he's got a fucking South Africa's most wanted man responsible for 8 murders as one of his senior managers. And he's telling the woman who's telling him to fuck off and, never contact me again. How dare you contact me? That's the kind of cunts these people are, mate.
That's
you know? So, I say, they wouldn't touch it. So, anyway, a lot of people got in touch with Tom Watson.
Right.
Now, I don't use Twitter that much, but I just happened to be on Twitter this night, and he said something that bugged me. I can't remember what it was, but he said something, made some remark about it, and tried to shrug it off. And I pulled him about it. And first of all, he tried to belittle me, which was his first mistake.
Right.
Because I cannot stand being belittled, and I made him look like a twat. The bloke is a fucking twat anyway, mate. Make no mistake about that. And then he tried to say that I was intimidating him. Yeah, I don't know who you are, but you're intimidating me. I turned around and I said, you know exactly who I fucking am, Tom. And how can I intimidate you when you stand up in the fucking House of Commons and ask the Prime Minister about paedophiling working out at number 10? Don't talk to the fucking daft. You're bugging yourself off, mate. So anyway, I was getting a lot of support at this time, and a lot of people were listening because it was mentioned on a few forums, and everyone was tuning in to see this very public spat where Tom Watson was making a like cunt of himself.
Right. And
people were going, yeah, Tom, how can he be intimidating you? He's talking to you like sensibly. You're mugging yourself off here. So he said, all right, Chris, I will read your report in my own time. Now this is someone who's publicly funded, very, very well publicly funded, in wages and whatnot. Right. Doing us the favour of reading a report which is backed by all legal documentation. An 8 times murderer who's sort of got away with it and working as grief counsellor. Chris, I'll have a look in my own time. I'll get back to you next week, he said. That gave him about a week and a half leeway. In the meantime, a lot of people were still tweeting him, when you're going to get back to Chris, when you're going to get back to Chris. The NSPCC website, that was getting a lot of stick. Did Grobkoff work for you? Did Grobkoff work for you? Tom Watson never got back to me, so there's your answer, people. If you think that man's a fucking crusading MP, you've got fucking head up your fucking arse, a useless cunt. But the NSPCC could ignore it no longer. So they released a statement saying, yes, Heinrich Grobkoff did work for us. No, he's no longer in our employ. He worked for the ANC. The ANC was a legitimate political party. We had no reason. Oh, they said they did police checks as well, which is a lot of fucking bollocks. If they'd done police checks, they would have found that he was wanted, because he was wanted. He was still the most wanted man when he was first employed by the NSPCC. So that's fucking shit for a start. But they said he's employed by the ANC, who was a legitimate political party. But he wasn't. He was employed by MK. And he was employed by MK as a very, very high up commander who had planted bombs himself by his own admission, and who was responsible for planning terrorist attacks for between 1987 and 1990. Now, if you read your history books, you will find out that the MK terrorist organisation were at their most active, and they killed more people in them 4 years than any other time since they've been started by Mandela in the late 50s, early 60s, 1961, I think it was. So he was a somebody, and I say big enough for the South African authorities to warrant causing a diplomatic incident by kicking down the embassy door on the basis that he was hiding there. I say if you look on my article on this, there's I can't remember. There's a fancy restaurant in South Africa, and this was sort of like neutral ground, if you like, where apartheid government officials and whatnot would dine alongside MK terrorists, and sort of an unwritten rule, like, no one said nothing. Now, the only time, the owner of this restaurant said the only time they ever got any trouble, we got raided when Heinrich Brokoff was meant to be having a meal there, and he wasn't. He was mistaken for somebody else. And so that is how much of a threat this man was. So anyway, so Tom Watson has never ever spoken to me since, despite saying that he would read the article and get back to me. And I say the article's not written on what allegedly happened. It's written on fact, and I have the paperwork to prove it. Solicitors' letters, MPs' letters, job applications, whatnot. So I have the evidence here to back everything up I say in this article. The NSPCC they released this ridiculous statement, which I took apart because I say Brokoff had been employed by ANC for no more than 6 months before he was fast-tracked over to MK. And he's still working. Yes, he did leave. He didn't go back. I say they had a solicitor, and the solicitor said to Sue that there was no way on earth that she would let this drop. The General and Social Care Council had their own solicitors, and they were saying that it's out of Sue's hands now, because they're going to go ahead with the prosecution anyway. And then it was all dropped, just like that. All dropped, just like that. In the meantime, Sue had been getting sent posters, which I have in my possession again. If a child is hit at 30 mile an hour, drink driving. Now, this was a grief counselling centre she was working at. You would not have horrific pictures of children laying dead in the road and whatnot on display in a children's grief counselling centre. No. Yet these were sent specifically by these managers, who was also under investigation. Now, you can read what you like into that, but I'll tell you what it is. It's fucking intimidation, mate. Right. Watch what you fucking say, otherwise you're going to end up run over, or your kid's going to end up run over. No two ways about it. Right. There's, on the article, at the end of the article, Sue sent me a bit about every single person she'd dealt with who bullied, and all three of them were hounded out of their jobs. And these are quality. I mean, we're not talking about clean toilet cleaners here. We're talking about professional people who are beyond social worker. They're qualified as social workers, and then they've advanced further into a specialised area. Right. We're not talking about fucking women who are prone to hysterics and whatnot. And all three of them were hounded out of their jobs by these two cunts at the NSPCC, which is the biggest children's charity in the country. Now, the NSPCC, when you got two paedophiles as the face of the NSPCC, there's something fucking wrong, mate. And when the government won't even acknowledge your evidence on a terrorist working for the biggest charity, children's charity in the country, you know that there's something wrong. And when two newspapers and a major television program are delighted to run a story, and then all of a sudden they're not delighted because of influence, inverted commas, that there's a lot fucking more to it than what you're being told. So, although Brokoff, he did leave. He never went back after the case was dropped. He never went back. He was, according to Sue, said she was told that he was paid a considerable amount of money with a gagging order attached to it to leave. So,
and where is he now?
I say he's in practice with Dorothy I can't remember a fucking last name. Stripes keeps coming in, but it's not Stripes. Who was his manager, who cleared him in the first investigation. They've got to practice in Yorkshire, which they practice from a house. And he's registered with, I'm sure it's Bermondsey Council, which he re-registered in late December 2012. So he hasn't got re-registered again till December 2014. On top of that, he's done some white paper work for various universities in the country, and the bloke blows people up without fucking. He knew that the civilians were going to be hurt. He met with one of his victims when he went in 2011 when he went back to South Africa. Incidentally, when he stepped foot in South Africa, even the South African authorities were aware of the danger he was in because they provided him with five elite bodyguards. And he's still in England. He can't go back to South Africa to this day. Now, when you've got an ANC president, and there have been 4 ANC presidents since Mandela, and yet he can't set foot back in his own country without having 5 elite bodyguards, you know, he wasn't just working for the ANC or the MK. Absolutely. Otherwise, he'd be a hero, mate. He wouldn't need, you know, he wouldn't need bodyguards. And he would be so terrified. And his address is still set. Well, I know his address, but it's still supposedly a secret.
Chris, this is amazing stuff that you bring out each time. It's your second visit to the show, and it's some incredible stuff that you dig up. So just before we go, why don't you give a little plug for your website?
Yeah, it's www.chrisspivey. That's Chris Spivey, SPIVEY.co.uk, www.chrisspivey.co.uk. The article on there's various articles on Madeleine McCann, but the one with Stephen Birch's specific evidence is called Digging for Madeleine. I'll push his petition again, which needs signing to get the authorities to act and dig up Royal Murat's backyard. That is also called Digging for Madeleine McCann, and it's on the Avaz petition site. The Hind Grove Cop, there's various stories on Hind Grove Cop, but the main one you want, which details everything, is the NSPCC, Rotten to the Core, Part 1, Hind Grove Cop.
Fascinating stuff, Chris. I'll definitely have you back on as soon as I can, probably in the month of September, towards the end, if you're willing.
I don't know if you remember last December, beginning of December, when Kay Golddigger-Smith went into hospital with morning sickness, inverted commas, right. And the nurse hung herself on what was the worst practical joke phone call known to man. Right. Her inquest is in September, okay. So I know that I have a lot to say about that.
Very good, very good. Fascinating stuff. Chris, thanks again for coming on the show, and we'll have you back on as soon as we can, and it's been great.
Thank you very much, Dave.
All right.
Take
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Now, the official story is that she was abducted for whatever reason, you know, but it all got a little bit nasty. Anyway, one of the main suspects straight away was a fellow called Robert Murat, who lives about 120 yards away from or his mother's villa is 120 yards away from the McCann's holiday apartment. And Robert Murat was pulled in very early as a prime suspect. Subsequently, he was cleared, and he sued quite 2 or 3 British newspapers. Got quite a bit in compensation. Now, then the McCanns became the official suspects. Right. And when Madeleine disappeared, they said that they wouldn't leave Portugal until she was found. Well, 2 days after they'd been made official suspects, they came back to England. Okay. And since then, we've had all these kind of wild goose chases, you know, letting them flying off to here, there, and everywhere, really, on possible sightings, you know, which are a load of old crap. But in 2012, a South African businessman called Stephen Birch, he entered Robert Murat's property under cover of darkness, without permission, if you like, with the most advanced ground penetrating radar available, state of the art sort of thing. And he found something buried a couple of foot under this new driveway that the Murats had put down. Now it's not a concrete driveway. It's just I don't know. It's got I think it's got a bit of a mix sub base and maybe a little bit tarmac, but certainly it's nothing substantial, Okay. And this ground radar of his picked up something buried there. So he's
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Conspiracy This Week. We've got a very special guest again on the show. It's Mr. Chris Spivey for part 2 of our interview of a couple of weeks ago. Now, we didn't get to all of the issues that Chris wanted to speak about, so he's been nice enough to come back on the show, and we'll be getting into some very heavy details. For those who don't know about Chris, he's a tattoo artist, but more than that, he's a journalist and a whistleblower. And I invite you to go to his website, www.chrisspivey.co.uk. I'm pretty sure that's right. So without further ado, Chris Spivey, are you there?
I am indeed, Dave. How are you?
I'm very good. So we had a great interview a couple of weeks ago, and I had a lot of feedback from people, and people were introduced to you for the first time, listeners of my show here. And I think by the same token, I was introduced to your listeners, so it's been a great match on that end. You got quite a few new articles out on your website, and one actually that caught my eye was I wanted to start with this just in case we didn't have time later on, was the one with the woman with the large breasts and the the bombs in the boobs. I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, I mean, we've had this for the past couple of weeks, this terrorist alert thing, haven't we? This old bollocks, and it is old bollocks, Dave. I don't know if you read the article that I put on before that, but we have a 20 million to 1 chance of being killed by a terrorist bomb.
Right.
Yet we're spending billions and billions on this so-called unending war on terror. Something like we're spending in the UK 4 billion just protecting the shores from terrorists, and it's a 20 million to 1 chance, And so what's that all about? And as I say, I've been writing about that this past week or so, trying to educate people on that. And then I came across this article today in the Daily Mail about a credible, this is their words, not mine, a credible threat of suicide bombers, female suicide bombers, having their breasts. Do you know what? I wouldn't know how much a mainstream media newspaper was these days, but I don't know, 50 pence, whatever it is. Right. But you might as well give that to 50 pence to a homeless charity, daily, rather than buying a newspaper, because it's just total bollocks, mate. I shake my head, and after time, it's got to the stage now, I can't even be bothered to address the issues because they're so blatantly obvious, that I feel like I'm insulting people's intelligence sometimes, sort of pointing out these things, I say, tits that blow up. It's like a party trick, isn't it?
That's incredible. So last time we had an interview, we spoke a little bit after the show, and you had some things that you wanted to bring up, and one of them was the Madeleine McCann kidnapping. So why don't you go into detail? First, go back and give people a little bit of an idea what this is all about, and what's your information on it, and what's your take on it?
Okay, well, now, when I appeared on Vinnie Eastwood's show a few months ago, I got talking about Madeleine McCann, and it turns out that Vinnie didn't know who Madeleine McCann was. So to to save any confusion, I don't know how much you know about Madeleine McCann in Canada.
Well, it's the little girl who was kidnapped, right?
She was in 2007 from a holiday resort.
Right. The parents were the prime suspects and all that, and there was all kinds of it was all over the news here. Yes.
You do. So you know about it in Canada, yeah?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yes. Okay. So we know that Madeleine and her twin sister and brother were left in their apartment alone. Well, Kate and Jerry McCann, the parents, went for a meal with. There was a big party, mostly doctors. I think there was only one of the party who wasn't a doctor, and they was having sort of this tapas meal in a restaurant just across the way, same resort, and they was checking regularly on the kids, every 15-20 minutes. And Madeleine disappeared, packed with explosives, and you just think, are you for real?
that kind of gives
unbelievable. But people will fall for this.
That kind of gives a new meaning to the word dynamite boobs, doesn't it? I mean,
it does, yeah, cracking rack. It's just so stupid. Why would they do that anyway? what kind of? I mean, all right, if you're a genuine terrorist, I suppose you've got to be a bit mad. But having a tit job filled with explosives, it's sort of a bit far fetched. But it's in a national newspaper.
That's
and if it's in a national newspaper, those people believe it, don't they?
Exactly.
It's just, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, to be honest, mate, but the tears were streaming down my face when I read it. I've never read something so ridiculous in all my fucking life, mate, I'm telling you. But there you go. I give a bit of advice on the comment I made on it. If you get lucky and the woman's got a wire hanging out of her nipple, move. Don't bother.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. I've never seen anything like that. I mean, that's just
20 million to one chance of being killed by a terrorist, Dave. And billions and billions of pounds. You got I put some comparisons of statistics on the article I did on it.
Right.
And I can't remember exactly what they were, but it's something like you got 500 times more chance of being killed by a fireman, than you have a terrorist bomb. So many thousands, something like 16,000 times more likely to be killed in a car. Are we spending billions on car safety and all this? It's just fucking stupid, mate.
Right.
But people buy into it, and it gives the psychopathic governments the excuse to bump up the security budget, and we know what that's all about. It's not about terrorists. It's about people like me, spying on people like me and you, Dave, that, and nothing to do with men in bomber jackets.
Well, for myself, on my radio stream, I've seen some pretty weird IP addresses, and having dug into it a little bit, have a little bit of computer skills, not a lot, but enough to find out. And it's funny that the provincial police here was listening in. Also in the U.S., either one of the FBI or CIA agencies were listening in, and I'm sure that they're listening in on your and going to your website.
Without a doubt, I mean, I know that I was being sort of, I'd come to their attention when I was at the Sovereign Independent anyway, because of a takeover bid, which was a strange takeover bid. Which I won't really go into because the details aren't public. But I knew from certainly back 2 years ago that I was under surveillance anyway. So fuck them, mate.
Right.
Fuck them. It's all on the website anyway, so they don't need to spy on me. It's all there anyway.
You're not hiding anything. You're only telling.
I'm not hiding anything, mate. No, I tell them how it is.
It's funny because when you think about it, really, I mean, who's actually done most of the terror and assassination plots and all that? It's basically been the government. I mean,
Well, of course it is. The government are the terrorists. We know that. I mean, going back to the Woolwich incident,
right?
I have indisputable proof, and there on video, that security services were involved. They couldn't have been anybody else but the security services, you know, by their actions and what they did. Now, if Lee Rigby, the fellow who was supposedly killed, the soldier who was supposedly killed, if he was really killed, I have photographs of either a plainclothes policeman or a member of the security services standing in the blood trail. So if he was really killed, you've got a policeman there destroying evidence of the crime scene, mate, which carries a 7-year prison sentence.
Exactly. You know, I mean, when you really look at it, I mean, it's lucky that we have people like yourself and all the alternative news media sites out there, because otherwise we'd be in the dark to all of this stuff, wouldn't we? I mean, it's
well, of course. I mean, how anybody can